you just have to have persistence. Never surrender and never retreat. Just keep up with it. All of these campaigns sometimes take a long time. The Canadian seal hunt's a good example. Decades and decades, but people didn't give up. And it's still, we still have to fight it, but we pretty much have them on the ropes. And thanks to the European Parliament, it looks like there's no market for seal pelts. So really when it gets the objective really always has to be an economic one, because these corporations and governments really, that's the only language they understand is economics. It's all about profit and loss. You have to make sure that their losses exceed their profits. Then they begin to listen. They're not interested in compassion. That certainly isn't anything that gets them thinking or about changing their ways. Losing money, that gets their attention. That's what we're doing with the Japanese whaling fleet. They have not made a profit for 4 years. They're getting more and more aggressive as a result, but we're going to bankrupt, and we said right from the beginning, our objective is to sink the Japanese whaling fleet economically. It really comes down to empowerment of individuals. We all have to understand that we have the power to change the world, each and every one of us, as individuals. In fact, it's the only thing that's ever changed anything throughout history. Governments don't solve problems. Governments cause problems. Governments are good at taking credit for the individuals who achieve these things. For instance, Abraham Lincoln may be credited with ending slavery in the United States, but he really had very little to do with it. He just took credit for it. It was Wilberforce and Douglas and people like that who really were in the trenches that brought that about. Wilson took credit for giving women the vote in this country when he really didn't have. In fact, he was the opposition until it was achieved, and then he took credit for it. Governments take credit, but they don't really actually do anything. I know there's a lot of hope for the Obama administration. I voted for him, first person in history I've ever voted for actually won an election. But we can't put too much faith in it, because this country its system of government is simply an oilocratic oligarchy, which is government by the oil companies for the oil companies. And until we run out of oil, which hopefully we will do, in fact I think everybody should drive a Hummer and get rid of this crap. We're going to we'll use every last drop of oil. It's just a question of who's going to use it. And so this is what we really have to understand, that we can make a difference. Back in 1972, if you were to even suggest that Nelson Mandela would be president of South Africa someday, it would have been in the realm of fantasy. It was an impossible fantasy. It couldn't happen. He wasn't even going to get out of prison. And yet he became president of South Africa. So it illustrates that the impossible can become the possible. And what was the secret there? Persistence, never giving up, and always being true to the objectives that he had set forth. And that's the same here. We have to understand that our clients are not people. Our clients are the species that we represent. So therefore, whatever people say critical of what we do is irrelevant. People do not matter. If they disagree with us, too bad. We're here because the whales want us, or the sheep want us, or the laboratory animals want us. That's why we're here, and that's their interests are what we have to represent. And so we can't be too moved by criticism, or people saying we don't like your tactics. Tough, we don't like your tactics either. But what was mentioned here earlier is strategy. Strategy is the most important thing, and you have to, if you don't have a strategy, you're going to lose. And that's one of the reasons that the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, which has been around now for 33 years, we've never been convicted of a felony, we've never injured anybody. It's because we have a strategy. I was doing an interview last month where a reporter said that he checked with the FBI on us on what our status was, and the answer was, they walk a very thin line, but they never step over it. And therefore, they can't do anything about it. But the other thing too is to understand that we live in a media culture. Our entire culture is defined by media. The media tells us what to think. They tell us what kind of clothes to wear. They tell us, how to look. The media tells us, basically defines our reality for us. Even when we think that it doesn't, it does. The media is constantly beating us up and working us over and manipulating us. And whether it's selling us things or telling us who to vote for or what to believe, all of our values are defined by the media. And the only way to get around that is to understand the media, manipulate the media so it works for you. And really, when it gets down to the media, they're a very simple enterprise. They only understand 4 things anyway. Every story, if you look at every story, only has 4 elements: sex, scandal, violence, or celebrity. And if it doesn't have one of those elements, it's not even a story, and they're not interested. And so if you want to get a story, you have to incorporate one of those elements. If you incorporate all 4 of those elements, you got yourself a super story. One of those stories that never seems to go away. When people say, well, how come you get celebrities? Well, because people listen to them. Isn't it amazing that we live in a culture where the most credible people are the people who make a living pretending to be somebody they're not? But that is the culture that we're stuck with. And again, that is a culture that defends our values. And constantly, it's telling us what we can and we cannot do. Oh, that's unacceptable, this is acceptable, and everything. So it's turned it around so that we justify violence. We're a very violent society. We're a very violent species. But we justify the violence. We want to kill animals? Okay. As George Carlin says, how come when it's a person it's an abortion, but when it's a chicken it's an omelet? We justify things. We deny things. We have put everything into abstractions. And therefore, when we kill people in defense of oil wells, well, that's okay. That's understandable. We're fighting for democracy because that is the name of the province of the United States, democracy. And people are going to be democratic whether they like it or not. And so we, in fact, enforce that through violence. Everything is enforced through violence. But we have to understand that in order to fight a violent culture, we have to be able to manipulate that culture. And the animal movement, the environmental movement, is unique in this respect. It is the most non-violent movement that has ever evolved. Nobody has ever been killed by an animal rights person or by a conservationist. Nobody. And yet, we're defined as being extremely violent. And the reason for that is we are extremely violent because we're challenging the dominant paradigm, anthropocentrism. And that is considered to be violent by those who we oppose. For instance, if you walk into the city of Mecca, walk up into the main square and spit on that black stone, well, your chances of walking out of Mecca alive are somewhat remote, Walk into Jerusalem with a pickaxe on your back, walk up to the Wailing Wall and start hacking away. You're going to get an Israeli soldier's bullet in your back, and nobody's going to have or we're going to be concerned about your faith. You committed an act of blasphemy. You insulted the culture of a religion of a people. Walk into the Vatican, attack the Pieta with a hammer. You're in big trouble. You're going to go to jail for that. But every day we go into the most profoundly sacred and beautiful cathedrals of the natural world, the rainforests of Amazonia, or the redwood forests of California, the coral reef off of Australia, and we totally desecrate and destroy these cathedrals. And how do we respond to that? We sign petitions or write letters. A few people dress up in animal costumes and jump around with picket signs, but if the barrier reef, if the rainforest, if the redwood forests, if these unique environments were as sacred to us as a chunk of meteorite in Mecca, a decrepit old wall in Jerusalem, or a piece of marble in Rome, we would literally rise up and risk our lives and kill to defend what we love. But we live in a world of abstractions. We live in a world where we've created fantasies that insulate us from the rest of reality. And the fact is, we're committing suicide.